and we will begin our program. Dr. Rashidi, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Boy, you really got to it, brother.
Great.
All right, well, I'm ready when you all are ready. Let me see if I can share the screen. That's the key thing.
Give it a shot. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful.
Yes. But I'm still remain the host. I want to admit these people that come in. I want to screen them
perfect.
Come in.
Perfect. It's an honor to be able to share with you again, even in a virtual sense. This pandemic has changed so much. Certainly for me, I'm used to traveling and being on the road virtually all the time. And now it's just the opposite of that. So I've learned, or am in the process of learning, to do a lot of Zoom presentations and using other kinds of social platforms. And in some ways, it's just very nice to be able to do what I enjoy doing probably the most anyway, is just showing photographs. And particularly today, because the focus is Black women in history, great Black women. And I am going to call this presentation, since it's about sisters in history, our ancestors, I'm going to call it The Daughters of Aset and Heteru. This is a presentation that I've been wanting to do for a long time. I'm a heterosexual alpha male Black man who loves Black women. And I'm an African historian whose mission is dedicated to uplifting African people. And so it gives me a lot of pleasure to be able to talk about the role of African women in history and to exalt them and to hold them up. And I think that sisters and brothers need to hear strong Black voices, strong Black men, honor our sisters. They need to hear directly from us, because history is not just dates and facts and figures, it has meaning. I'm going to dedicate this presentation. I'm going to speak about 45 minutes. And I understand we'll have a little time for Q&A. I'm going to dedicate this presentation to Dr. Adelaide Sanford. I've already heard her name mentioned today. I know that she's been the subject of some racial abuse. Imagine that, our Queen Mother. I was fortunate, Brother Solwazi took this photograph at a program where I was able to spend a minute with her in Brooklyn, John Henry Clark tribute some years ago. So I want to dedicate this to Dr. Sanford. Now, let me just show you the pictures. This is one of the few men that I'll show in this presentation. This is a statue in Paris of Alexander Dumas Père. Alexander Dumas Père had Haitian roots. One of his grandmothers was a sister in Haiti. So he was a man of African heritage in 19th century France. And he was one of the great writers of that time. He relished his African heritage. He didn't run from it. He gave us a number of expressions. One is, your work may be finished, but your education is never completed. And of course, he said, one for all and all for one. But in this case, the reason he's here is because he uttered my favorite expression, and that is, a man's mind is elevated to the status of the women with whom he associates. I just love that. A man's mind is elevated to the status of the women with whom he associates. Perhaps the next time Baba James, Dr. McIntosh, and Sister Betty Dobson, Dr. Dobson, asked me to do a presentation, I can do something on some of my latest work, and that is the African presence in Europe. As a matter of fact, I'm doing a webinar, two-part webinar next Friday and Saturday, and perhaps I can share that information with you at the end. Anyway, this is the great Alexander Dumas, and then you can see more of the statue, and then the sisters themselves. Now, most of the images I'm going to show you are from the Happy Valley, from the Nile Valley in Africa, but we can go back even further than that. And all the photographs I'm going to show you, maybe one or two exceptions, but I think all of them are original photographs that I've taken in a museum or somewhere down the road. This is a reconstruction in the Museum of Man, ironically enough, in Paris, of Dinknesh, also known as Lucy. This is perhaps our earliest identifiable ancestor, even though she's not quite human as we understand it. Dinknesh means you are wonderful. And these bones were found in Ethiopia about 3.2 million years old. They were found, I believe, in 1974 by an Ethiopian scientist. But we're going to spend most of our time.
True or false? Wow, I know this game. Actually, Henry Cavill is the actor who plays this.
Somebody needs to mute themselves, please. This one takes us to pre-dynastic Kemet. Kemet means the black city or the black community. And it's a phase in Nile Valley history that is all synonymous with Egypt of the pharaohs or dynastic Egypt, ancient Kemet, or Kemet, ancient Egypt. Now, the word Kemet itself means the black city or the black community. And these are from
You're muted. We can't hear you.
You're muted.
All right, I'm glad you told me. I don't know how that happened. We'll just take it from there. Thank you. Anything like that that happens, if there's any technical issues, if you can't hear me, if you can't see me, if you can't see the photograph, whatever, let me know, because all I can see is the photograph on the screen. I've been doing Zoom stuff for about a couple of months now, and every time I think I have it together, something happens, and it's very humbling. Anyway, we were talking about Madasi, Asante for that. So we were talking about the dynastic framework. A dynasty is a family of rulers, one member of the family coming after the other for an extended period of time. There were 30 of them, and they lasted a little over 3,000 years, or about 3,000 years. And of those 30, 25 or 26 were native African dynasties. Now, this is at the end of the pre-dynastic period, which would take us back, I guess, about 6,000 years ago, 6,500 years ago. And we don't know who these women were. They may have been, maybe this is how they saw God at that time, but certainly they're in the feminine image. The one over here is of the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford. The one in the center is in Brooklyn, and this one is in the Met. What I have found, and I guess it shouldn't be any controversy about it, is that museums are essentially repositories of loot, and they are purely European in nature. And that is what I've been working on the last 10, 15 years in particular, trying to go to as many museums as possible and photograph the African collections with the belief that there are enough artifacts in these museums, in these repositories of loot, to reconstruct the entire history of the African world. All right. Now this one, certainly it's not spectacular looking by any stretch of the imagination, but it's important. These are what I call jar ceilings, I guess made of mud. This is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, a fantastic museum as far as having a lot of our stuff is concerned. And it is important to us because it has the name of perhaps the first female queen, the first queen that we know of in history. And she is a woman from northern Kemet named Imhotep. Night is at peace. And that's what this is up here. You can't see it very well. I mean, it's not spectacular, but it's important from the perspective of documentation. And this one is similar. This is in the very early phases of Nile Valley history, just kind of getting it together. This is what is called a serek. It's a kind of something similar, I guess you might say, to a coat of arms. And it's the insignia. This is how, in the first two dynasties, this is how the kings of Kemet identify themselves with these what are called sereks. Later, I guess they would evolve into what we would call a shanu or cartouche, a nameplate of the king. This one, in fact, is of a woman named Mernite. So there we have that name, Night again. Night is a female aspect of God that's associated particular with the northern part of Kemet, or what is called Lower Kemet, the area near the Mediterranean. And this one belonged to Mernite. Mernite is probably, we can't say with certainty, Mernite is probably the first female king that we know of in history. Okay, she may have been an actual female pharaoh. Traditionally, the line of descent is traced to the female side of the family, and the men were the kings. The woman was the mistress of the house. She controlled that without question. But in times of danger, the woman could also rise to kingship herself. And there are several examples of that. Mernite is probably the first one. And then one more piece. This is actually a sarcophagus. A sarcophagus is just a great stone coffin. And this belonged to a sister named Hetepheres. Hetepheres comes to us from the 4th dynasty, about 2600 BC, and she is the wife of the great pyramid builder Sneferu, who himself is the father of the great pyramid builder Khufu. Now let's start looking at some of these sisters for sure. We can see the female image much more distinct, and we become aware of who these sisters actually were. For example, this is one of my favorite pieces. I show it a lot. This is of King Menkaure and his significant other, Kemer-Ernepti II. This one is very, very symbolic. It shows a sister and a brother together, very tender, very supportive, very proud. And this is from the 4th dynasty during the Pyramid Age. This one is in Boston. And here's a very similar one I found in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. I love to see Black men and Black women together. I cannot get enough of that. This is also from the Pyramid Age. This is from an artist workshop. And this one is at the end of the Pyramid Age. This would be from the early part of Dynasty 6. And this is a sister named Opnis, an ancestor named Opnis Pepi II. And she's holding her son, a boy king. He became the king of Kemet when he was only 10. His name is Pepi II. And this one actually shows a woman not only as a mother, queen mother, but literally as the throne. She is the seat. This child became the king of Kemet when he was 10, and he is believed to have reigned for 94 or 96 years. And here she is again. I think, in fact, I'm not sure. I get it mixed up all the time. One of these is that same queen, Opnis Pepi II, and another is the female aspect of God called Het-Heru, who is a kind of a nourishing entity. She's associated with sensuality and beauty and motherhood. And this is in the Imhotep Museum in Saqqara. One is the queen Opnis Pepi, and the other is the female aspect of God, aka goddess Het-Heru. This one takes us to the 11th dynasty, about 4,000 years ago. And this is important because this is the first time we began to see that I know of, the color Black used in ritualistic fashion. We know that these were African people. We know that they were Black people. This is Egypt, after all, in ancient times, before the invasions. But Black can be ethnic and it can also be symbolic. And in this case, the color Black seems to have come to symbolize the color of rejuvenation, renewal, resurrection. Put it short, by this time, the color Black begins to be used as the color, the representation of the color of God. I hope that makes sense. The word Kemet itself means the Black city or the Black community. This is another image of that same sister. I believe her name is Kawit, 4,000 years ago. This is a female sphinx during that time. This is from the 12th dynasty. The 12th dynasty is my favorite period historically. It lasted a long time, very powerful kings. But for some reason, for the most part, you don't hear about prominent women during that period of time. We know that they were prominent because you have during this time a whole series of female sphinxes or sphinxes with the body of a lion and the head of a powerful woman. And this happens quite a bit during that period of time. This is in Brooklyn. Here's another sister, a queen, and this one as well, the next one, who actually fought in African liberation struggles. And this one as well. This is Imhotep. And this sister actually led troops into battle. And this is her coffin. This is in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Let me go back and tell you who the others are. This is Tetisheri. She is more or less the queen mother of the late 17th dynasty. And this period of time is very important because this is a time when Kemet, when Africa had been occupied and the Africans were engaged in a liberation struggle against the people called the Hyksos. And both women and men played pivotal roles in that. And here you have the sister Tetisheri in the middle, portrayed back to back. And on each side is a representation of her grandson, a man named Amos the First. Amos the First and his wife and queen, Amos Nefertari, were the ones who completed the expulsion of the Hyksos, the firstborn invaders of Africa. And this is another sister in the middle who played a similar kind of role. Her name is Nupkes. All right. Now here is perhaps the most important of them all, of this line of women. So you have three generations. You have Tetisheri, and then you have Imhotep, and then you have the granddaughter, and this is Amos Nefertari. This sister, this ancestor was so important that she was actually deified during her lifetime. She is considered a national hero, or if you like, shero in the history of Kemet. There are four people with that characterization. One is a man named Aha Mena, or Narmer. He's the first known king of Kemet. He unified the two lands, the southern part and the northern part. The second person is the wife of the woman, the husband of the woman that I just showed you portrayed in black a minute or two ago. His name is Imhotep II. He's the second one, 1,000 years after Narmer, the second one to unify the two lands. And this sister and her husband are the third and fourth. They're the first couple associated with that. She is so important that she is painted black, and there are more images of her painted black than any other figure. Remember, blackness is ethnic, but it is also symbolic. So when you see a person painted black, ritually or literally, you know that was I'll just be blunt, that was a real badass person. And Amos Nefertari and her son built a city for the workers, the people who maintain the tombs and the temples and monuments. They built a city for them. And as a result of that, she became the matron of that city. She is what we might call the necropolis of the city of the dead on the west bank of the Nile in Luxor. And these are images of her. And virtually all of them are painted black. And these images are found not in her tomb, but in the tombs of the workers themselves. Here she is with her son. Notice her son is not painted black, only she is. Here's another one, a statue of them together. And you have a lot of these. I look for these in museums. If I go in a museum, these are some of the pieces that I look for. And I've found maybe 15 so far, 20 of them in museums around the world. All right. Her daughter, and then the most powerful from the next generations. And this, of course, is Hatshepsut. Makare Hatshepsut is the most powerful of the female kings of Kemet. We oftentimes call her Queen Hatshepsut, and I think the reason for that is because she began as a queen, but mostly simply because she's a female. So let's talk about her for a moment. I hope everybody can hear me and that you're enjoying the photographs. Hatshepsut comes to us in the early 18th dynasty, about 1500 BC, 3,500 or so years ago. Her father was a king. Her father was a king. His name was Thutmose I. She married a king. His name was Thutmose II. The Africans had just put the Hyksos out of the country. And then all at once, her husband dies at a young age, and suddenly, the person who would have inherited the throne, because in order for the king to be the king, he had to marry the woman in whom the royal bloodline ran. That's what we call a matrilineal line of descent. The person who would have normally come to the throne was still a little boy. And so it was decided that Hatshepsut would reign as queen regent. But once she got into power, she took on the trappings of a king and actually became a female king. and she reigned for about 20 years. And she was very powerful, very important. This is her temple at a place called Dir el Bari. You can see the temple in the center. And this is carved out of the cliffs of Western Luxor. This is on there, or was on there, now it's in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. This is a king and queen of the land of Punt in the Horn of Africa. Another beautiful one of Hatshepsut. And these are her monuments. Now, I'm just finding out, after having been in Sudan a little bit, that Hatshepsut was also a bit of a warrior queen. I always thought she was a very peaceful sister. Well, apparently it wasn't quite like that. And she is also one of Kemet's greatest builders. And she had these two tekken erected at Karnak, and these are the two largest tekken or obelisks in Karnak Temple. Now it's interesting because the tekken or obelisk is actually a phallic symbol. It's interesting that this powerful woman had the two largest of them erected in Karnak. If you go there, you see these. They're not to be missed. One is for her, the biggest one, and the second one, the second biggest one, is for her father, Tutmos I. And you can see it there. Here she is again. I think a lot of you all are in the New York City area, so you can always go to the Met and see these. This is the Lady Tuya, and she was the mother-in-law of the king. Which king? A man named Imhotep III. I think that most of us have heard of Queen Tai. This is Queen Tai's mother. Look at the details. I took this picture in the Musée du Louvre in Paris. I didn't know who it was for a long time, but it was such a striking wooden statue that I took the picture. Sometimes you do that and then you figure, I'll figure out who it was at another time. And I found out just a few months ago that this is the mother of Queen Tai. Her name is Tuya. And here's her daughter and her son-in-law and one of her granddaughters. This is a statue of Queen Tai and Amenhotep III in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. This is 60 feet high. And there's a detail. So here they are. Here's 3 generations of African women. The Lady Tuya, who is not of royal birth. That's her here. I've identified her. And then in the center is Queen Tai herself. Queen Tai has more representations than any other woman in the history of Kemet, more than Nefertiti, more than Hatshepsut, more than Cleopatra VII. There are a lot of her. Her husband reigned for 38 years at the height of Kemet in the 18th dynasty, about 3,400 years ago, and she maintained power even after her husband passed away. And then this is the granddaughter, and you can see that this face has been deliberately mutilated. So 3 generations of African women at the height of Kemet. Several of Queen Tai as a young sister. This one is actually found in Sudan in a temple there. This is in Cairo. This is the one I just showed you a moment ago in Paris. Here she looks very serious. This is actually an ancient replica. And this one is in the Pitti Museum in London. This is in Florence, Italy. I could just do one just on Tai. And this is the famous one. If you've seen images of Tai, in all likelihood, this is the one that you were probably fixated on. A lot of us use this to show the quintessential African queen, the quintessential woman in the Valley of the Nile. I started to say Black woman, but I'll just say women because they were Black people. And then here it is from all angles. Nowadays, when I go in, if I find an artifact, and I think it's important, I try to photograph it from as many different angles as possible and also photograph the caption itself. And then here's the piece. There's a close-up. That's the sister. That's Tai. And here, just a fragment of her face. Just even that's so beautiful and sensuous. Here are 2 of the daughters of Amenhotep III and Queen Tai. And I could compare that to these schoolgirls in Ghana. In much of Africa, certainly Ghana, they make these sisters keep their hair cut short until they're up in age. And here's, again, the daughter of Queen Tai. This is an Emory Museum in Atlanta. This is the torso of Nefertiti, a famous Nefertiti. Here's another one. One of the images of her that you don't see. We usually see the image of Nefertiti that makes her look so European. This is just a comparison. This is a piece of work by the African-American sculpturist, and that is Elizabeth Catlett. And I can't help but wonder if she saw this of Nefertiti or was inspired by it. All these are Nefertiti. Look, this one is actually in her tomb. And this is where Nefertiti was actually supposed to be buried. I don't know how many people have been in this particular tomb where Nefertiti was supposed to be buried. Her body has not been found. A family portrait, Akhenaten and Nefertiti, holding hands, that appeals to the romantic in me. Nefertiti pouring Akhenaten a goblet of wine. Two of their daughters, and again, these are called the Amarna princesses. Surely you've seen these photographs. These are not extraterrestrials. These are not aliens. I assume it was just a style of art. This one is called A Stroll in the Garden, and it just shows the freedom and the easiness in which men and women in the Nile Valley were portrayed. I would challenge you to go to ancient Greece, to ancient Rome, to the Aztec world, to ancient China, and find images of men and women together. Usually it's almost all men. Occasionally you will find women as well. But in Africa, women and men seem to have a level of equality and respect for each other that I really appreciate. These are just images of sisters from the late 18th dynasty. Look at this one. I call this the sister with the big hair. And you can see the hairstyle here. And these are the actual extensions. They did put hair extensions, and these are found in the tombs. Of course, we've seen this one of King Tut, Tutankhamun. This is Queen Tuya, the mother of Ramses the Great. This is Nefertari, the wife of Ramses the Great, Nefertari and Ramses II together. Let me start to wind down. Nefertari, this is another Nefertari. So you have almost Nefertari. And then you have Nefertari, the wife of Ramses the Great. The root of the word is Nefer, or you have Nefertiti. The root of the word is Nefer. It means beauty, N-E-F-E-R. So if you have a name like Nefertari or something like that, it will mean something like the beautiful one has arisen. The beautiful one is with us. The beautiful one is in our midst, something like that. And this is a sister. This is a noble woman from the 18th dynasty, the high point, and you can't tell me that that doesn't look like the spitting image of none other than Michael Jackson. This one, we're moving down the road. This is a sister named Cairo Mama from the 20th dynasty. And these three that I'm going to show you now are the living remains of three queens from dynasties 20 to 22. This will be about 3,000 years ago. And you only have to look at these to reaffirm the African identity, the African character of the ancient Nile Valley civilizations. This is Queen Hentawis, and yet another, and one more. Now, I know that some of us are anguished when we see the reports of our ancestors' graves being dug up in Egypt. I spend a lot of time on Facebook, as a lot of you probably know, and I post these reports of quote unquote archaeological discoveries. And if I post something about a tomb or coffins that have been exhumed, it really bothers a lot of people. I have mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, I feel, again, our culture is being disrespected and desecrated. But on the other hand, it shows us even more and more that these were in fact African people. Down to dynasty 25, this is a powerful woman named Amanirdis. She was the sister of the king, and she became the king of the de facto ruler of the southern part of Egypt. And during this period of time too, I think this might be a little out of order. Let me just come back to that. This is Amanirdis. And her successor, a sister named Shepin Wepet. They were buried in there, in that very pit. This is the wife of the last ruler of the Nubian 25th dynasty. And these are deities that we see represented during that period of time. I don't like to use the word anymore, gods and goddesses. I will say aspects of God, because I think our ancestors always recognized and realized that God was one, but with different aspects and manifestations, some feminine, some masculine. Among the most important of the feminine aspects of God, we have a woman, we'll call it, a goddess, there I go using the word anyway, called Het-Heru, which means the house of Heru. She's identified as a woman with cow's horns, or sometimes she has the head of a cow, okay, because the cow is a nurturer. But again, she's associated with femininity and motherhood and maternity and beauty. This rock crystal of Het-Heru belonged to one of the queens of the founder of the 25th Nubian dynasty, and that is called Pianki. And this right here is a representation of the female aspect of God, much more famous than Het-Heru, called Aset. And the world knows her as Isis. The name Aset is very important to us, and I suggest we use it as much as we can, because the name Aset means the throne. So you can always or usually identify her as a woman with a little throne on top of her head. And here's how she was portrayed in that same dynasty. And of course, it is Aset who is the prototype of the Black Madonna and Child that we see emerge in Europe and that we still see. The Black Madonna and Child, or the Black Virgin statues and icons of Europe, are even now the most venerated icons in all of Europe. They are considered miracle workers because they are painted black. Now let me finish up. I'm just going to take about no more than 5 more minutes. This is Credonc. Now we're towards the end of the dynasties. This is from dynasty 26 to 27. Credonc is the mother of Imhotep, the great multi-genius who comes to us at the dawn of the Pyramid Age. For whatever reason, 2,000 years after their physical death, Credonc and Imhotep, they were deified, they were elevated to the status of godlike entities. Now, most of the statues of Imhotep, this great man of science, this great multi-genius, are so small that you can barely make out the racial or ethnic features. One afternoon, many years ago in Paris, my daughter lives in Paris, her mother has Senegalese roots. So I've spent a lot of time there over the last 15 years trying to be a good father. One afternoon, I'm in the Louvre, the Musée du Louvre in Paris, and a voice seemed to call me and says, Runoko Rashidi, turn around and look at me. That's what I seemed to hear. And it was this little statue of Credonc, the mother of Imhotep. So if you have any doubts about what Imhotep would have looked like, imagine or cast those doubts aside, because you can see his mama. Look at the detail. Credonc. Her son was so significant that even his mother was deified. And you can see the comparisons here between these sisters in the Omo Valley in Ethiopia. That's ochre in their hair. I don't think we spend too much time. This is one of the criticisms some people like me sometimes get. I don't think we spend too much time with Kemet. I think we need to do a better job of connecting Kemet with the rest of Africa. This is Cleopatra VII, who also appears to have had an African ancestor. And finally, we look at other parts of the Nile Valley. These are from Merowe, or some people will call it Mero, but it's Merowe. And Merowe is important to us because you have a series of women here called Kandakas. It literally translates to mean Queen Mother. And these are perhaps the most powerful women in the ancient world, period. Merowe was the successor of the civilization called Napata, which a lot of us call Kush. During this time, Kemet has fallen. This is during the time of the Greek period in Kemet. But you have a number of these Kandakas or queen mothers, and I'm just learning who they are. For example, this one is named, I'm going to read her name off, Shana Decato. And there she is with her son. And these were big sisters for the most part. They took up space. This is another powerful one. This is Amani Shiketo. And this is the jewelry of Amani Shiketo. Her tomb was robbed. This is in Nubia, in Sudan. Nubia was known as the land of gold. Now these, a couple of them, we don't know who they are. I'm just glad to collecting images. I know that these are either goddesses, female aspects of God, or some of the queen mothers of Sudan. And these are in museums from around the world, in Scotland, in England, in Germany. Look at this one. Look at this sister with this big, heavy necklace on. A Kandaka or queen mother in the center of those two female aspects of God that I told you about. Heru here with the cow's horns, and Aset, the throne. And here you have a powerful, determined looking African woman in the center. These sisters were often the ones who chose the kings, and sometimes they ruled with absolute power. And here are their pyramids. And I love to be here. When you go, and I've been there twice, there's hardly nobody there. And the sand is so soft and powdery. And there's just such serenity. I love it there. I believe this is the pyramid of Amani Shiketo. And then this is the last of these Kandakas. I promise 2 minutes and I'm done. This is a sister named Amana Tori. And here she is portrayed as on what is called the Naga Temple. Look at this. Here's a Black woman, a Kandaka, a queen mother with a sword in her hand, and the enemies of her nation by the hair, and she's about to mess them up. This is the temple that you see that on. Here she is again, but look at how they are portrayed in Western museums right now. This, for example, is in probably the most prestigious museum in the United States as far as Nile Valley artifacts are concerned. This is in the Oil Institute at the University of Chicago. And this is a direct whitewashing of our history. Finally, a few from a few other parts of Africa. We're just dealing with antiquity. This is from Aksum in Ethiopia. And you see a sister seated on a throne with that good, happy to be nappy hair. This is also in Ethiopia in Aksum. This is called the Bath of the Queen of Sheba, or Makeda. Makeda is kind of a mythical, semi-mythical African queen who ruled over the Horn of Africa 1,000 years ago, perhaps longer than that. And this is called the Palace of Makeda, the Palace of the Queen of Sheba. This one takes us to Carthage in North Africa, Tunisia. This is a so-called portrait, a statue of a woman named Sogolan, who was the mother of Sundiata, the founder of the Mali Empire. And then this beautiful piece, Idea, of the mother, the queen mother. This one is from, this is in the Seattle Art Museum. And finally, just a few images of a sister, not from ancient times, because we can only cover so much. Of course, this is a statue of Ya Sanchua. You may have my dear sister Ya Sanchua in the audience today. Ya Sanchua is a queen mother of the Ajisu clan of the Asante Nation. And she instituted one of the wars against the British. In fact, it's oftentimes called the Ya Sanchua War. And this is on a roundabout as you enter the city of Kumasi in Ghana. And I wanted to end with another one of our ancestors. I dedicated it to Dr. Sanford, who I adore, but another brother that meant so much to me, and this is Dr. Asa Hilliard, one of our greatest scholars, just a wonderful person. I have a photograph of him right in front of me. And this is a photograph I took of him with one of the descendants of Ya Sanchua. This was our only trip to Ghana together. And finally, just a few other things to close up, to leave a message. Our ancestors paid a tremendous price for us to be able to speak out against injustice. We don't have the right to be silent. And of course, this is a depiction of a woman in Brazil named Anastasia, who refused to submit to the slave owner. And as a result of that, he had an iron mask placed over her mouth until she did submit, and she never did. It rusted on her mouth. So I repeat, our ancestors paid a tremendous price for us to be able to speak out against injustice. We don't have the right to be silent. Can't take that road. And bottom line, Black is beautiful. Being Black and powerful will be even better. Let's work for that. That's the bottom line. That's why we spend time with history. That's why knowledge of self is important, and we spend time with it, with all the challenges that we have confronting us as a people, because we need to know what we've done, to know what we can do. We need to have this framework. It's our guideline, it's our compass. It tells us what we have done and what we can do and what we must do. And this is what I believe. If the Black woman is a queen, and I believe that she is, why would I settle for anything less than royal? I love to see a Black couple together. Few things are more thrilling when I see a Black man and a Black woman together that act like they love each other, that respect each other, that want to be with each other, that are proud of each other. Maybe the only thing better than that is a Black family. And we cannot get enough of that, because that is the foundation. We are the extended family. Of course, if you want these photographs, a lot of them are in my newest book, Beautiful, Royal, and Divine, The Black Image in Antiquity. And then also some of the photographs, I have to share this with you. You can go to my website, drrunoko.com, and order these, a beautiful scroll called Queens of the Nile. And then I have a webinar coming up at the end of the month on Black people in Europe. But those are the pictures that I wanted to share with you. I hope that you were able to see them loud and clear. We have a beautiful history, and I appreciate the opportunity given to me by Imhotep to share just a little bit of it with you. So, Baba James, Dr. McIntosh, Dr. Dobson, it's on you now.
Yes, sir. Dr. Runoko Rashidi, I mean, it was another magnificent presentation. You know, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. These pictures, if they were seen by our youngsters and seen by anybody with any kind of intellectual curiosity, they inspire people to go and do more research, to go and look and do more. I was, when I spoke to you, I was very impressed. I saw one picture of Imhotep's mother, but never saw the one that you showed today. And as you said before, if you don't know her roots from looking at that picture, then I can't help you. I want to take care of just a little bit of business before I open it up to questions from the audience. You left us lots of time for questions, but I want to ask everybody to look down at the bottom. You'll see a piece that says chat. And when you look at chat, there are two ways that I showed you can contribute to Imhotep. One way is through Cash App. You can send the Cash App to $Dr. Imhotep. That's $Dr. Imhotep. Or you can go to this link on the bottom of the page to the Imhotep GoFundMe. So what I advise you to do is, if you can cut and paste it, cut and paste it. There's still people coming to enter into the meeting. So support Imhotep through those two ways that I told you. Obviously, you can always mail something to us at our headquarters. So I'm going to get out of the way. People that saw the slides or have other questions for Dr. Rashidi, please, I think there's a way for you to raise your hands, or if I can see you, let's see if we can do the raising hands thing. What I'll do is I'll go down. I'll tell you what, put it in your chat. Put it in the chat. Put your question in the chat, and we will read the questions to Dr. Rashidi. No one has a question. I have a question, Brother Runoko. Why are there no contemporaneous, or are there any contemporaneous statues of what Dr. Clark called the first multi-genius Brother Imhotep? Why are there, or if not, why not?
That's an excellent question. And I've never seen anything. Now, Imhotep comes to us, as you know, just to review, from Dynasty 3.
Yes.
And he is important to us as the father of medicine and many things. And this multi-genius who designed the step pyramid, this first big stone building for King Djoser. There are statues that we have of Djoser that come from the pyramid chamber, but we don't have anything like that of Imhotep himself. As a matter of fact, they've never even found Imhotep's tomb, which I find very, very, very interesting.
Yes.
But for whatever reason, 2,000 years after he passed on, then he's given this newfound status. On one of my early trips to Kemet, we had the good fortune of having an African tour guide. I'm not talking about a Nubian. In fact, I saw this brother and I was introduced to him, and he was very melanated, kinky hair, all that. And I said, "Oh, my brother, my Nubian brother." And he was very offended by that. He said, "I'm not a Nubian." He says, "I'm an Egyptian, and I'm a descendant of the people who built the pyramids." So, you know, we got off to a rocky start, but he was brilliant. And we're in a museum, and he did something I'll never forget. He stopped in front of us, an image of Imhotep, and says, Imhotep became identified as a kind of a god of writing. And later generations, really beginning around the 26, 27 dynasty, 2,000 years after his death, before they would write something, they would have a libation ceremony. And they would pour ink in the ground and ask themselves rhetorically, could there ever be another like Imhotep? And that is the status that he attained. But even when we see the images of Imhotep in this late period, they're usually very, very small, no more than a few inches high. And I think the reason for that is because they were put in the tombs of ordinary people, not necessarily the kings and queens.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else have a question? I see Sister Dente, Louise Dente from Cultural Caravan is printing something now. It says that she's typing. And as soon as it comes up, I will see it. I'll again remind people, support CMOTAP. You can support us if you have Cash App by going to $ Dr. CMOTAP. I have it there in the chat. You can cut and paste it into your own computers. I also put a link that you can cut and paste into your own computers where you can go to a GoFundMe for CMOTAP. Okay, Sister Dente, are you finished with that question? No, it hasn't come up. So Dr. Runoko Rashidi showed us dozens of slides of ancient African women. He told us some of the history and no one has a question.
Yeah, hello? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, hi, greetings. I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. Thank you so much. I just had a question. The pictures you had shown of those queens, the unwrapped pictures, where were they found? I just never seen that. They were just so well preserved.
Incredibly well preserved. Maybe more than any so-called mummies that I know of. Now, in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, and it's changing now because they're moving the museum to another location. But historically, for the last 10, 15 years at least, you have 3 what are called mummy rooms on the 2nd floor of the Egyptian Museum. The first one, the big one that most of the people stop into, are the major kings of dynasties 17, 18, and 19. People like Ramses the Great, Thutmose III, etc. And then you move along, that'll wear you out. It's so crowded and it's so intense. And then you move along in the museum, and there's a section for the remains of mummified animals, cattle, crocodile, etc. And then finally, if you still have enough energy, on the other side of the museum, if you keep walking, and your ticket will get you in all 3 of these, there's one for people from dynasties 2022. And that's the one that has these queens in there. Not many people go in there. Now, there are big signs in every one of these rooms, or at least the first 2, no photography allowed. And in the first one, they strictly enforce that. But in the 3rd one, since not many people go in there, you can, if you have a little cell phone like I do, you can take a photograph. And that's where those are. And I have mixed feelings about it. I think the last thing those sisters would have wanted was to be on display. But at the same time, it's impossible for me to to imagine anybody who could look at those and not see Black women. So to answer your question, make a long story short, they're in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. And I assume they will be on display again when they move the museum to Giza.
All right, Dr. Rashidi, there are several questions since I opened it up. Let me
All
see.
right.
Someone on the Galaxy tab just said, thank you for this class. What happened to the smash nose? Who did that? Then on iPad, we have someone that says, this was so enlightening. I'm so appreciative that my cousin, Dr. Akil Kalfani, invited me. What I'll say is Dr. Akil Kalfani, a great African scholar, has spoken at our organization, is on the ballot for Congress in Newark. And anybody who is in that district, please vote for that brother. This isn't somebody that came to the community and said, I want to run. This is somebody that is running, that ran, is winning, and has been supporting all along. Now, we also have from Mary Alice Miller. She says, are there lists or inventories of items, artifacts found in...
Hello.
One second, Betty, hold on.
I'm fine, thank you. And you?
Mute her. She's on another phone, I guess. So, all right, so let's see. From Mary Alice Miller to everyone, she said, are there lists or inventories of items, artifacts found in pyramids that give clues to cultural life during that era? For instance, I have heard that there had been items related to Black women regulating their reproduction found in the temples or pyramids.
All right. Well, the two questions out of there. One is about the noses. Now, that really attracts a lot of attention. I spend a lot of time, as you probably know, and you all please support Imhotep. When you support Imhotep, you know, you're supporting the community, you're supporting yourself. So please don't stint to support them. They've been doing this for a long time. And one of the things I admire most about them is their consistency. They've been doing this for a long time and they deserve our support. If we don't support them, who will? Now, in terms of the noses, that really draws a lot of attention. I spend a lot of time on social media, particularly Facebook. I probably have some Facebook friends and followers that are listening right now, that are watching right now. And if I post one of those statues, sometimes it just wears me out, with a nose mutilated like that within seconds, literally, somebody's going to say they knocked the noses off because they were Black, because they were trying to disguise their racial identity. And I used to say something like that myself. And then I began to look around and I couldn't find any documentation for that. And more than that, I began to see European statues, purely European statues from the Roman period, with the noses knocked off too. So I don't think that that has anything to do with, I don't think it's a racial thing. I don't think it's an effort at racial animus and knocking the noses off to either show disrespect. And certainly you can't disguise the features, because when the nose is missing, when the nasal orbit is bigger, you look even more African, not less. I think that those missing noses, and I could be wrong, or those mutilated noses, have something to do with an ancient religious ritual associated with death. And that was designed to destroy the power of that person. I'm not, you know, I can't really clearly articulate it, but I think that that was done by the ancient Africans themselves as a form of religious ritual. That's what I think. Now, in terms of what's in the tombs and the temples, it started off in the pyramids. You have in Meroe, or you have in Egypt, the remains of about 125 pyramids, 125 of them. And some of them were in fact for queens. In Sudan, you have the remains of more than 300 pyramids. Some of them were for queens, but the interesting thing about the ones in Sudan is that you didn't have to be a royal figure to have a pyramid. You could just be a very powerful person and have a pyramid. Those pyramids have virtually all been ransacked. And a lot of the pyramids, we don't know who they belong to. And they found all kinds of remarkable things, and the temples even more so. So I would say that you need to do a little more research, because it's hard for me to be specific about the things you're alluding to in terms of female reproduction, but I do know that you have a temple at Kanambo that's identified with science and birth, and they have medical instruments there, and they have women on birthing stools. Okay. Also, you have something related to men. You have in the 6th dynasty a tomb that I would love to go into. Every time I go to Egypt, I ask my tour guides about it. It's called the Doctor's Tomb, and it's from the 6th dynasty. And what it shows is a group of young brothers being circumcised by an African surgeon. And so to me, the tombs are the big deal. There are hundreds of them, if not thousands of them. And there's no telling what we will find in there if we look through enough. That's a vast subject, but I hope I addressed it a little bit. Anybody can always get in touch with me. You can always email me at Runoko@hotmail.com, Runoko@hotmail.com. You can call me at 323-803-8663, or you can go to my website, drrunoko.com. I hope we don't end the dialogue and discussion here.
Dr. Rashidi, do you have access to the chat there where you are? Maybe you could type your number there to everybody.
Let me see if I can do that. All this is fairly new, but I might be able to manage it.
With respect to Mary Alice Miller's question, I was wondering if maybe, isn't there a surgical papyrus, Dr. Rashidi, that might have information about birth control and stuff like that used by African women?
I think that might be the one called the Ebers Papyrus, and they deal with that.
Brother
Go ahead.
Brother Dix took me to see the Edwin Smith Papyrus here in New York.
Where was it, in Brooklyn or the Met?
It was at the it was on like 105th Street and 5th Avenue or Madison Avenue. I forget what it's called, but they had and is the name of that, I think, on the imposition of medicine upon a man. That's what they call the Edwin Smith Papyrus. And I believe that there were some things in there with respect to substances that could be used for birth control, and probably in the Ebers Papyrus also. Those are both, ancient papyri. And I don't know if that's what Mary Alice Miller wants, or she wants actual, items or artifacts.
Not sure about that. There is an interesting book that Charles Finch turned me on to called The House of Life. In fact, I can type that too. Now I'm even typing on Facebook. Oh, wow. House of Life. And the author is a man named Galiungui. I might even be able to work that. I think that's it. And that it deals specifically with that. I think the House of Life was known as I guess that's what the hospital was. It's not something I'm an expert on, but try that book, The House of Life by Paul Galiungui. And if you just do a simple Google search, you might be able to turn up a lot of information. As I get older, and the more I do this, the more it's clear to me that I know a lot, but I only know so little. And that doesn't bother me, it humbles me. And there's room for all of us to get involved in this research. It bothers me that a lot of times, and I'm speaking Germany, a lot of us seem to wait for a European to come and give us our history. A lot of the information is there. We just have to go and dig for it. One of the brothers I like the most, we have a beautiful relationship, and that's Brother Tony Browder, who I know has spoken for you all, and he's actually financing an excavation on the west bank of the Nile. He didn't wait for anybody. He took the initiative. What I like about Imhotep, they took the initiative. Everybody can't do everything, but everybody can do something. So find the thing that you can do and do it well and do it for your community and take joy in it.
Dr. Rashidi, we have a question from an 11-year-old. It's from Akindeye Olasola. And she says, by the way, I'm 11 years old, and I would like to ask, how did the ancient Egyptians kick out the first European invaders?
Well, good question, my young daughter.
I'm a boy.
Young man, my young son. Thank you for clearing that up. I didn't mean any disrespect.
I think I started by using the pronoun she. I didn't recognize the name. Thank you, brother, for clearing that up.
Isn't it wonderful you have these young scholars in our midst who I hope will take it far beyond anything that I ever imagined and we ever imagined. You have the invasion I was talking about is called the Hyksos, Hyksos. That means the desert princes or the rulers of foreign lands. Around 1700 BC, the family began to fall apart. Couldn't keep it together. And Kemet, or ancient Egypt, is invaded by this time by these people called the Hyksos. And they ruled over the country for about 120 years. But those Africans were determined. It took a long time. And they finally, by force of arms, they fought them. They drove them out of the country. So that's the first foreign invasion of Kemet that we know of by the Hyksos. And it ended up in a golden age for African people. About 600 years later, you had another group. And this group is called the Peoples of the Sea. And these are white, these are European pirates who invaded Kemet, and they were defeated on 3 occasions. And ultimately, the invasions began to happen with greater and greater rapidity. You have the Assyrians, and then you have the Persians, and finally the Greeks and the Romans and the Arabs. But the Hyksos were the first ones, and they were driven out by the founders of Dynasty 18. I hope that helps a little bit, young brother.
Thank you.
Give thanks to your parents.
There's a question from Anks Maat Renee to everyone. Who are the ancient queens? She has HMT, NSWT, that held the title of God's wife.
Spell the name again, please.
Which one? Her name? Or okay, HMT, NSWT. And I think I don't know if that was her translation of ancient queens.
Okay.
And then she said that held the title of God's wife.
Well, to my knowledge, the title God's wife or the divine spouse or the wife of Amen comes to us. The first person that I'm aware of to hold that title for sure is Amos Nefertari at the beginning of the 18th dynasty. But the title really takes on a new power during the 25th dynasty, around 700 BC. This is the time when the Kemet again had fallen into disrepair or disarray, and the people from the south, the Nubians, came forth, and they had an empire that included Nubia and Kemet too. They had an empire that stretched from Khartoum all the way to Jerusalem, and women were very powerful. And this is when the title really took on an added dimension. You have first a sister named Amen Nirdis, Amennirdis. And then she is followed by another sister named Shepin Wepet. And these are the most powerful women to ever hold that title. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I'll look it up. The question, which you answered correctly, the ancient queens, the ancient Medu Neter is Hemet Nesut.
You got me there.
Hemet Nesut means ancient queens, the queens. Hemet Nesut.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for the clear.
All right, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to communicate with Zoom. You hear things but anyway, thank you for sharing. Appreciate that, sis. Anyone else?
We had a question from Dr. Tyreen Wright. She says, if artifacts are going to continue to be excavated from Kemet, Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia, where should they be housed? She said, should they be preserved in institutions in those nations and regions as opposed to Western museums? And then she wrote, Western museums are so problematic. And there's another question from Ninko says, I logged in late and don't know if you covered the women of the Arochukwu Empire. I also wondered about the horse riding in ancient Africa. I missed the National Black Cowboys and I found a video of horse riders in Niger yesterday.
Well, that's not something that I talked about. You do have a tradition of cavalry in places like the Maasai states in Burkina Faso, and also the Moors themselves, who fought alongside the Carthaginians and later in the Roman armies, were known for their prowess on horseback. In terms of the first question was, give me that first question again, Bob.
It was about where should those artifacts in Kemet, Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia be housed?
Most of the, I guess, the heyday of Egyptology in particular came in the 19th century. And this is when the Europeans controlled much of the world, especially the French and the British and the Germans. And they just came and more or less took what they wanted to. And some of those artifacts also ended up in the United States. For example, I got direct from the mouth of the curator of the Egyptian and Sudanese collection at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. I just read this 2 or 3 days ago. She said that they have, from Nubia alone, 25,000 artifacts just from Nubia that is in that one museum. So during this time, they could take pretty much what they wanted to. And most of the things that we marvel at in terms of the great pieces in these museums were taken during that period of time. Since then, these countries have signed agreements so that if you are excavating, you will split the artifacts that you find up, or that the governing countries themselves would have control over how those artifacts were distributed. So certainly I think that they should remain in the countries that they were excavated from. But at the same time, you know, you have the Egyptian government. Those people aren't indigenous to Africa. And what bothers me more than anything else is that, in my opinion, they're exploiting our African heritage. You know, they're making a mint of artifacts and history that they had nothing whatsoever to do with. So on the one hand, I think the artifacts should stay in the countries that where they were excavated from. But at the same time, some of these countries don't have any love for Black people and are just exploiting our history. So it's a mixed bag.
All right, I see a couple of people from the Black Solidarity Day Organizing Committee. I see Dr. Shadidi Kenzie. I see Dr. Shagun Shabaka. If they would care to say a word or two about Black Solidarity Day, or if they have something they want to say to Dr. Rashidi, I'd ask them to do so now. I'll unmute Dr. Shagun Shabaka first.
Hey, Bo, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we can.
Okay, peace. Greetings, Brother Rashidi. I had a question. I was trying to put it through there, through the chat. I don't know what happened, but my question was, would you elaborate on the Cleopatras and what, if any, role or connection they had to the Greco-Ptolemy rule of Kemet?
All right. There are at least 7 women with, good to see you, my brother. There are at least 7 women with the name Cleopatra. The most famous one is Cleopatra the 7th, who reigns, I think, from 51 BC to 30 BC. Now, the first dynasty of Kemet begins around 3100 BC, 3,000 years earlier. Finally, towards the end of the dynastic period, the Africans just get tired, and the family fell apart, and the Greeks came in. Alexander comes to Egypt in 332, and in 304, one of his generals, a man named Ptolemy, has himself declared king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Ptolemy the First. Cleopatra the 7th is the last descendant of Ptolemy the First. By this time, the Greeks have been in Africa for hundreds of years, and surely there have been some mixtures. We believe, for example, at least one of my colleagues who's the leading authority on Cleopatra 7th in the world, has told me that Cleopatra, either Cleopatra's mother was African or one of her grandparents. Okay, so Cleopatra must have had some African blood, and Cleopatra the 7th saw herself as an Egyptian or Kemite goddess. And I think that she identified more with Kemet than she did with Greek itself. It's unfortunate in so many ways that we put so much emphasis on Cleopatra. because she's not one of the most important people in history, but there's so much controversy about her. So I would refer you to this this lady named Sally Ann Aston. She wrote a book about her. Dr. Clark has a chapter in the book Black Women in Antiquity, edited by Ivan Van Sertima, and he mentions Cleopatra. And J.A. Rogers has a chapter on Cleopatra the Seventh in the book A World's Great Men of Color, Volume 1. All right. I hope I addressed your question.
You certainly did, Dr. Rashidi. Anyone else with a question? You can put it in the chat. Take a look at it. Give it to. All right. It says, here's a question from Brother Dana. He says, how do more fundamentalist Islamic governments view ancient cultures, Sudan, Iran, etc.? Do they block your work?
Well, I don't want to generalize. I've been to Sudan twice. I've taken 2 groups there. I've been to South Sudan. I've taken groups to Ethiopia. I've been to Eritrea. I've been to Djibouti. The only country in the region that I haven't been to is Somalia. I've been to Tunisia, etc. I haven't had any problems, but I think it's important to watch what you say. For example, I learned through experience in my early travels to India that you have to be careful what you say, that if you want to continue to travel to these places. And so I make it a point to stay out of politics, and I just deal with the history. And so far, I haven't had any restrictions. I haven't had any problems.
Okay, we're going to give you a couple of minutes for any more questions, and then we're going to release Dr. Rashidi because he's worked very hard over this last hour and a half to educate us, and he deserves a rest too. So anybody else? Okay, again, I just want to thank everybody who attended. Dr. I can't stop calling you Dr. Rashidi. If I don't call you a doctor, then how can me and Shagun call ourselves doctors, right? Right, Shagun, how can Dr. Shadidi, did you have anything you wanted to say? Shadidi Kinsey, Dr. Shadidi Kinsey from the Peace Health Center. Saw her here. All right, so if not, though, I just want to thank you on behalf of both CMOTAP and the Black Solidarity Day Committee. I want to remind everybody on November 2nd, no work, no school, no shopping. And if you have questions about that, you can find the webpage on Facebook called Black Solidarity Day Organizing Committee, Dr. Carlos Russell, or you can contact the phone number 718-398-1766 or 347-907-0629, and we'll be glad to tell you more about it. If we are not on our mailing list and you haven't been getting our flyers or our postings, I'm going to ask everybody to please be quiet while I'm speaking, to put your email address in the chat, and we'll add you to that list, and we will provide information to you. Now, there's someone else that wanted to say something. I see Brother Salwazi, who's giving credit for taking that beautiful picture. Are you there, Brother Salwazi?
Yes, how you doing, Dr. McIntosh?
Wonderful, brother.
Thank you very much. I just want to say to Dr. Runoko Rashidi, thank you for your many years of service to our people and for reminding us constantly of our greatness and being very unapologetic for it. Throughout the years, I've learned many things from you, as well as when I first met you in '95 on our trip to Kemet with Dr. Ben. And I'm just very proud and humbled to be someone who has learned from you. And I'm happy to see that the person who asked that question, the 11-year-old, was my son, my youngest son, Akindaye. So, he had that question. So I was happy that he I didn't know what he was going to type out and say, but it was a good question.
Well, you know what they say, brother, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And that picture that you took of me and Dr. Sanford is one of my favorite photographs. So thank you for letting me use it. And I appreciate the work you're doing. And we're growing and evolving together. And it's a pleasure and an honor and a privilege.
Thank you, my brother. I appreciate you always.
Stay strong.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll be posting this video briefly for those people who didn't see it. And I will probably put it on the Black Solidarity page. And I thank all of you who came and who came on time and not operating on CPT, so-called CPT.
Can you hear me, James? Can you hear me? This is Betty.
Yes, we hear you, Sister Dobson.
Okay, I just want to tell the final word. Dr. Rashidi, the last time I saw you was in Cleveland. And we've started a Imhotep, Ohio group, and we're thinking that we need you to come to Youngstown to share some of this wonderful work that you're doing. In addition to that, it'll be my honor to tell Dr. Sanford that you held this Zoom in tribute to her. I know she'll be delighted. So I want to congratulate you on the work that you're doing. And I want you to know that I'm going to pass this on to her. And it was good seeing you. It was better when I was sitting there in that room with you, but this will just have to do. So thanks so much.
Thank you, my sister. Please send my regard to Dr. Sanford, and I'm ready to come to Cleveland whenever Corona says it's cool.
Youngstown. Youngstown. Yes, right.
Now, everyone, one last word. Thank you for those who I've had someone communicate that they made a contribution to CMOTAP. Everyone who wants to, just look in your chat right now. I'll give you a couple of minutes. You can put, you gave you 3 ways. You can do it with Cash App, you can do it with GoFundMe, and you can do it with sending a check directly to that address. Thank you again to Dr. Runoko Rashidi and to everyone who participated today. Be well, be safe. On November 2nd, no work, no school, no shopping. Again, also, anyone who wants to be communicated with, just put your email address in the chat. We'll get to you. All right. With that being said, we're going to end the meeting. Stay safe.